Start.
Okay.
Do we speak into that microphone or is it just picking us up?
I'm not sure.
It's probably in the ceiling and the wall.
So hello everyone. My name is Peter Young. I'm the Yale class of 74, Brantford College, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to the 18th on a series of panel webinars on careers after Yale, which got started in March of 2012. This series focuses on providing students and alumni with candid views of different professions via panels of experienced practitioners in each of the fields. So the overall concept, though, is to try to cover professions that Yale graduates pursue in both large and small numbers, but also careers where there are myths and misconceptions about the profession, where the profession is headed, how you get there, and what kinds of people do well and or are happy. And I think we all know that with TV and movies, a lot of professions get either maligned, as in the case of my profession, investment banking, or hyped in the case of law or medicine and so forth. Today's profession is a legal profession. And just to give you an idea of the extent to which these have been popular, for the first 17 of these career panels, we've had 1,993 students and alumni attend. In addition, since after the first three we started recording them, we have 2,841 who have viewed the recorded videos of that. So there are a total of 4,500, and we have an average of about 280 watching each particular event, either live or recorded. So obviously, I think for a lot of the students and alumni, these are proving to be a useful additional supplemental source, I think, of information that otherwise may not be available to you, in books or articles or so forth. What are some of the professions that we have covered? We've covered legal 2 times, and this is the 3rd time. Investment banking twice, medical 3 times, consulting twice, internet and data services, entrepreneurism, drama and film, education, government service, nonprofit organizations, investing, and there was one we had where it was a comparison of investing, investment banking, and consulting. And our next career panel is tentatively on February 24th. We're trying to work that date out, and it's going to cover what it's like to be an architect, which is also a popular profession that Yaleys go into. So what's a bit unique about this event is that it's held in 3 simultaneous venues. Since alumni are everywhere, but they tend not to be in New Haven, and they tend to be in New York or elsewhere. Students, of course, are in New Haven. The panelists, they can be a variety of places. We decided the best way is to have a meeting room in New York, a meeting room at Yale, and have them connected by video conference, and then to have others connected by streaming video. And that seems to work out quite well. In fact, one of these, we actually had a student who dialed in at 4:30 in the morning from Shanghai, because she was in the Yale in China program. So she got a gold star for getting up early. I'd like to introduce Elaine Mazzarella, who's up there at Yale. Elaine, you want to wave your hand there? Okay, all right. Elaine is with the Office of Career Strategies at Yale, and she's going to have the important task of coordinating questions and things coming from Yale. But I also want to thank a number of people and organizations who really helped make this possible, because it's very much a team effort. In particular, I'd like to thank Trish Takimoto, who has been involved working with me on all 18 of these. I'm amazed that you're still standing. And this is a collaborative effort on the part of a number of organizations. So just to mention them, the Yale Office of Career Strategies, AYA, the Association of Asian American Yale Alumni, the Yale Alumni Association of New York, the Junior Class Council, and others. And all of these organizations have helped both in terms of thinking about which professions to cover, but also in the marketing and getting the invitations out to students and alumni. Last, I want to give a special thanks to Paul Weiss, the law firm, who is gracious in providing the use of this meeting room here and their video conference equipment. As most of you know, Paul Weiss is a very well-known leading global law firm serving some of the largest public and privately held corporations and financial institutions on an international basis. And we're privileged that Les Fagan, who is a partner at Paul Weiss and a Yale graduate, not only arranged for the use of these facilities, but also is a panelist today. So what am I going to do for today, for today's event? First, I'll just introduce the panelists, but then we are going to go through the 6 questions that were on the invitation, so you know which ones they are. During the Q&A, obviously, those of you who are here in New York, you can raise your hands. Those who are at Yale can raise their hands, and Elaine Mazzarella will call on you. But those of you who are watching by streaming video, obviously, you can't raise your hand. And you should send your questions via email to yalecareerpanels@gmail.com, and I have an iPad here, and will be able to read your questions. What I'll tend to do is try to rotate so that, in fact, we get questions from all three venues. So we do expect to end promptly at 5:30, but for those of you who are in New York, our panelists have graciously agreed to stay for another 30 minutes to answer your questions. So I won't read the bios, but let me introduce our 4 panelists from the right to left. On my far right is Les Fagan, a partner of Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison. To my immediate right is Tim Harkness, who is a partner at Freshfields, Bruckhaus, and DeRinger. Derringer. I apologize. To my left is, immediate left is Peggy Kuo, who is a U.S. Magistrate Judge for the Eastern District of New York. She had a different position until very recently, and her bio came in last because she got a promotion in between. So you have a good reason. And last, on my far left, I'm very pleased to have Sandra Leung, who is the General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Bristol Myers Squibb. So you see we have a bit of diversity. We have 2 women, we have two Asians, and one who's a moderator. We have different parts of the legal profession, and I think this is very nice because we have the court systems, we have the general counsel, and we have partners of law firms. We can't get total diversity in these if you only have 3 or 4 panelists, but I think this is really an excellent panel that has different points of view. So let's start. I guess the first question is this. I think it's a little easier to answer this question for the legal profession, which is how do you get in the profession, and what's the typical career path? So maybe with no particular reason, maybe we can start with you, Les, and we can work to my left.
The simple answer to that question is you first go to law school because you need a law degree, and then you have to take the bar, but then it gets complicated. Most of the law schools have career offices and career fairs of one kind or another, and it's at that point in your career that you have to start making decisions. Do you want to go to a law firm? Do you want to work for the government? Do you want to work for a company? Do you want to work for an accounting firm? One of the wonders of a legal career is how many choices you have. I think the key is getting to a place where you can start getting some training in whatever you want to do. And there are many, many opportunities for that training in different segments of the law industry. I just wanted to say one other thing. I remember when I graduated from law school, there was a speaker, and his theme was, in the law, like in so many other professions, it's really a function of luck. Where you go, what road you take, or what opportunities you find, and of course, as in any profession, it's luck and also the ability to exploit luck and make use of the opportunities you see and follow them through. And that's kind of how you get into the profession and how you progress in it.
I agree with that. I would say a couple things in addition. First, I think that the number of paths, what they look like, and how they're forming is changing. So back in olden times when I was graduating from law school, the kinds of paths were probably 3 or 4 different things you could really do right out of law school. And now there are many more types of things one can do. Certainly I've seen law students graduate from U.S. law schools, then go off and practice law, sometimes U.S. law, but practice law outside of the United States. If you look at the legal market right now, the largest provider of legal services in the United States, the most widely known one, is LegalZoom.com, that's run by a Yale. And no, honestly, so it's not a law firm at all. There are many different ways to practice law now, so the number of paths are changing and evolving, and some of the skills that current college students and recent graduates have really lend themselves to some of these developments. I would say that it's all fine and good to go in some of these paths, but the fundamental skills of being an advocate, either in a courtroom setting or in a transactional setting, are really sort of immutable. So getting the training, I would echo what Les says and stress it, getting training that makes you a good lawyer is going to be important whichever path you choose.
Peggy?
So first of all, thank you, Peter, for including me in this panel.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the way you get into the profession is by looking within yourself and figuring out why you want to go into law. So you've got to write an essay to get into law school, and that's kind of your mission statement, why you want to go. And if you get into a good law school, then that statement is a pretty good one. And you should keep referring back to it as you go forward, because there'll be a lot of distractions and there'll be more opportunities. But I think that if you go back to why you went to law school, that will ground you. I think in law school, you need to begin the process of discovering how wide the world is, and then start by process of elimination the things you don't want to do. So you'll have opportunities to do externships, to take classes, to work during the summers. And you should take advantage of those to figure out the things you want to do and the things that you thought you wanted to do and you really don't. So by the time you graduate, you'll have a pretty good idea of at least your first job. And I always think that people try to plan their entire career from the beginning to the end, and you can't do that, because you should plan on a 50-year career. And what you're doing at the beginning is not going to be what you're doing at the end. So the most important thing is to be really engaged in what you're doing at the beginning, at that moment. And when you're no longer interested, or your life has changed, your interests have changed, then you move on and you try something else. And I think if you kind of take that approach, then your career, like your life, will be fluid and will follow a more natural path. And as the previous speakers mentioned, there will be opportunities that open up that you can't imagine now. So it's really impossible for you to say in 2015, this is what I want to do 50 years from now, this is where I want to end up, because those jobs may not currently exist. So your main responsibility is to get the training, get the skills, ground your values, and then be prepared for the opportunities that open up in 20 or 30 years. I think we'll talk more about how to be successful in that, but that's how you get started.
Sandra?
So I agree with everything that's been said by Les, Timothy, and Peggy, particularly Peggy's comment that you have to really think about why you want to go to law school, and that's, in my mind, the most critical. I decided I wanted to go to law school at a very young age because, as a child of immigrant parents, I really felt that my parents and their friends and our relatives were disadvantaged because they didn't know how the system worked. And I really wanted to be in a position to speak for people who couldn't speak for themselves for whatever reason. And so I knew in going to undergrad that I wanted to go to law school, so I was very focused on that. I majored in political science, although you could major in anything, I think, to go into law school. I think some of the best lawyers are math majors, for example. So, for me, I had a very atypical career path. I knew that I never wanted to work in a law firm. It just wasn't in me to spend all my time in the library doing legal research and writing and being at the beck and call of a partner. No offense to anyone on the panel.
It's all right.
And so
Except for these folks.
Now we're at beck and call of the clients.
and it just wasn't any press. There weren't many Asian American women in those roles, and I just couldn't see myself doing that. But I decided that during my summers, after I was in law school, I worked at the Legal Aid Society one summer in the civil division. And then the following summer, I worked in the criminal division of Legal Aid Society. I thought maybe I'd be a criminal defense lawyer. And after working the criminal defense division of the one summer, I decided I wanted to be a prosecutor. And that was the career path that I took, where I felt I spoke with crime victims. I never thought back then, when I started working at the prosecutor's office and the Manhattan DA's office, that one day I'd work for a corporation and be its general counsel. And that goes to, what Les said before, that I've come to appreciate that so much of life is serendipity. And you have to be open to things that happen. And a lot of what happens to you is luck. But as they say, luck's the intersection of hard work and opportunity. And you have to really be open to working hard, being good at what you do, but also being open to things that you don't expect and just taking some risks and some chances. I've taken several risks in my career and put myself in a position where I totally was outside my comfort zone. But I learned the most from those experiences, and so I would, encourage you that, it's important to understand why you want to go to law school, and then be open to doing things. And just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you always have to practice law. In my company, when I work for a biopharmaceutical company, we have many lawyers, people who start out as lawyers in the company, then they go on to the business side, whether it's an M&A side, whether they lead one of our commercial businesses, and they're extraordinarily successful because the training you get as a lawyer really positions you well to really translates well to other types of work, non-legal work. And I think the lawyers who become business people are probably the toughest clients, but we learn the most from our toughest clients as lawyers.
Before we go to the next question, I want to make two comments. One is, which I normally make at the very beginning, and that is, it's very, very important before you make any career decisions to do very good self-assessment, because no matter how much information you get, good information you get about what it's like to be a lawyer, or what it's like to be an investment banker, or an actor, whatever it may be, you have to judge it against an accurate understanding of yourself, your skills, what you like, you don't like, and so forth, and down to some really mundane things like, do you like being outdoors or indoors? Well, if you like being outdoors all the time, there's certain professions that are rather incompatible. So no one on this panel can help you with that thing, but I would encourage you to really try to do an accurate and candid assessment of yourself, likes, dislikes, etc. The other, before we get into the next one, which is where is the profession heading, good and bad, I want to be a good moderator and say that, as a non-lawyer, I look at the legal profession, and first of all, there's some wonderful things about it. I think the legal profession covers lots of things, not just being a lawyer, but it permeates all different things, and you could have different careers, and whether it's in government, or whether it's in the court system, or whether it's in business, or whether it's in nonprofit, you can have a lot of different roles and very interesting ones. The dark side today is that obviously there's a bit of a crisis on the legal side, because one, there are a lot more lawyers than there are jobs. Applications to law schools have gone down considerably, particularly for outside of the top schools. And one statistic which came out in the New York Times recently said that only 43% of the graduates of law schools 9 months out had a legal job, right? Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be a lawyer, but it just says you got to do your homework and understand what the environment is. So with that plus and minus, let me ask our panelists the next question, which is, what do you see where the profession is heading, both good and bad? Les?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, the legal profession, at least the private bar, went through something of a crisis about 6-7 years ago with the financial crisis. Law firms started to reduce their demands for talent. Clients were more rigorous in dealing with law firms and billing. So there was a period of contraction, I suppose, which hasn't completely ended. But I actually, and Tim and I were talking about this before, I actually think in a way that that's a plus for people entering the profession. And I speak principally about the private law firm world where I live. Law firms are more efficient. Law firms are hire people to do law work rather than gritty document review. Law firms are hiring the best, and that means that if you do well in law school and get a good law job, it's likely to be more rewarding. I also think there's another plus, two actually. One is the continuing emphasis and evolution of private law firms' commitment to pro bono. Pro bono work is now more or less an ethical obligation based on bar association and other requirements. And the best of the law firms take that to heart. And as a statistic here at my firm, there are very, very few lawyers who are not engaged in significant pro bono or other kinds of public service activities. And I think that has lifted the profession and improved the lives not only of lawyers but a lot of people out there. And the last point I'd make about a positive direction that the private bar is heading, and that is a growing and ever continuing sensitivity towards the lifestyle of lawyers who come to the firms. And so over the last many years, there have been programs of flex time, there have been programs of part-time, there have been very generous programs about paternity and maternity leaves. This isn't just talk, this is reality. And I think in contrast to the profession that I entered, God knows how many years ago, it has made the lives of people who enter the profession more civilized and more manageable. Tim?
Just to follow on what Les was saying, I would actually take it a bit further. I think that the first point that Les made was about the financial crisis, and I do think that spurred change, but I think we're actually in a period of much more fundamental change. As far as I'm the grandson of a draftsman in a factory, computers do all that work. And there are big groups of reviewers that I used to work on some of those teams and supervise some of those teams later in my career. That day is largely fading. I think that's a good thing societally, but it's a tougher thing for people to get certain kinds of jobs. So I see a fundamental shift. I tried a case last fall where probably 15 years ago it would have been a 20-person team. We had 2 partners, a senior associate, a good paralegal, and a really good computer. And that's how we tried the case. So I think that that's better work, it's better lifestyle, and more efficient for the client. So societally, that's good, but it makes some of the career paths less clear. And so I think we're in a state of flux, and that evolution, I believe, is going to change a great deal. I believe what Les is saying about work-life balance is correct. As a profession, we're definitely talking about it. I think we're doing more in many places than talking about it, is trying to affect real change. But if you look at the numbers, in all honesty, it is still not where it needs to be. I think technology will allow us to get there more quickly, but there's still big challenges in the profession. So there are aspects about being a lawyer that are difficult, and some of those difficulties aren't going away as quickly as technology might allow them to be. I think another positive is that there are big movements within the world as far as the economy and different societal changes that lawyers get to be part of, actually affect. The pace of change of capital formation and different countries dealing with each other on a business level means that the pace of change in the last several years, and I think that's going to continue, is extremely rapid, probably more rapid than some governments can keep up with. So part of the exciting part about the profession, at least for me, is being able to participate in those changes and deal across borders. And I think that kind of work will increase rather than decrease.
Now, Peggy, you're in a very different environment, right? Because being in the courts is a very different dynamics than being at a law firm, so forth. So could you focus on that? Because I know it's quite different in terms of growth and demand and what the career paths are.
Well, Peter, at the beginning you said you wanted us to give a candid view of the profession, so I'm going to give you kind of the good and the bad and the ugly. So the good, as Timothy was saying earlier, is that it is more global. There are more opportunities. There are, you can practice law all over the world with an American law degree, and that was something I was interested in. So it's now possible, and that's great. The legal profession has become more diverse. That's wonderful. A lot of different points of view, lots of different opportunities, like Sandy had mentioned, that we wouldn't have imagined were possible earlier. I would say the bad, a really big bad that people worry about, is that the law is susceptible to the winner-take-all economy, and so there are very high-paying, very good jobs in very prestigious law firms. There are not that many. And so that's a reality. And, one person's efficiency is another person's unemployment. And so I see, for example, I just went through the process of hiring law clerks. I see amazing resumes, people from great schools, great grades, great job experience, who do not have jobs. And there are these holes in their resumes that are like consulting or short-term jobs or whatever, and it's very disconcerting because when I graduated law school 25 years ago, this was not, like nobody planned to be an unemployed lawyer. And yet I would say, fully half the resumes I saw had that. And, it doesn't mean that they were not good students. It doesn't mean they weren't good lawyers. It just means the economy has become such that people get laid off. I got laid off. I had a job at the New York Stock Exchange that was perfectly good. I was chief hearing officer. It was a job I thought I would be in forever because the people who had been in it had been there forever. But the stock exchange went public. There were mergers. They no longer needed a regulatory arm, so my job disappeared. And that was a little bit frightening. But, I was lucky, and luck is a big part of it. And I was able to rebound. I ended up working for the city, which is a job that I hadn't thought I would do. It ended up being wonderful. But I think everybody needs to kind of build into their psyche that having a law degree is not insurance. I mean, it's insurance, but it's not foolproof. And that everybody should have the resilience and the skills, and the network of people that can help you through those, I would say, inevitable periods. And that's just how it is. I just don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, you know it. And so people really need to understand, save your money. Do not make $100,000 and spend $100,000. You've got to save your money because there are going to be times when you're going to need it. But on the other hand, having a law degree means it is a lot easier to bounce back. There are opportunities. You can make your own opportunities. You can go out on your own. People can work in startups. You can do things that are not strictly law related. So I would make a big pitch for the law degree, and also, but go into it with the realistic idea that you may get lucky and get a great job and be employed continuously for your entire career, but that's not likely.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, though, if you go into law, you want to have a vision that what you're trying to do ultimately requires a law degree. And the one thing that I find upsetting that I hear from a lot of students is they say, I went to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I have to tell you, and I don't care, you could substitute business school, architecture school, it doesn't really matter. I hope for each of you and students that that your reason is not just to postpone making a career decision, right? That you've already thought through that, in fact, that degree you think is going to get to you where you want to go. Sandra?
Well, again, going last is kind of, I agree with what everyone said. I don't know how much more I have to add to that. I agree that you shouldn't go to law school to hide out, and especially because it's so expensive. And it's very expensive to go to law school, and if you go in there just to hide out, it just implies all sorts of things about not everyone has that luxury, and it's not necessarily a good thing to do. So, I think things are changing dramatically in the law profession, beginning in the period we talked about, 2008, 2009. I think a lot of what law firms had done before, the so-called legal processing work, is being outsourced now, offshored, and clients like me, companies like mine, who are the biggest consumers of services from law firms, are demanding better transparency as to how our money's actually being spent. I remember when I started in my company 20-something years ago, we'd get a bill from a law firm that just says hours we worked and this is what you owe us. No explanation at all. And we should thank them for the privilege of allowing, them to, for having them work, for allowing us to be a client. Not so much, and it's completely different nowadays, where you have in-house law departments like my own demanding better transparency in how money is being spent. We don't pay for summer associates to work on our files. We won't get billed for summer associates because that's the law, that should be on the law firm doing the training. We're also demanding greater diversity in law firms too. It's I agree we've made some progress in diversity in law firms, but it is still woefully lacking. And without, and I think the law firms that really appreciate and really believe that they have to believe that having a diverse workforce and diverse attorneys working on client matters is critical to the firm's survival. And I'm not sure that law firms really get that and understand that. And I would say for those of you who are thinking of going to law school, I think if you think you're going to law school because you want the big firm job, and you go to an Ivy League school now, you want to go to an Ivy League law school and get a job at a white shoe law firm, that might happen, but it might not. And I would encourage those of you who really want to be a lawyer for different reasons, to serve the public good, so to speak, to be a community service lawyer, to do something other than working in a law firm. That's a very noble and good thing to do too. There is a need for lawyers who are willing to work at the legal aid societies to serve the various communities that are woefully underrepresented and really need legal services. So I don't think it is a profession that people should stay away from. There have been a lot of changes, but I do think people have to stop thinking about there's only one way to succeed as a lawyer, and that's to go to Ivy League undergrad, Ivy League law school, major summer associate positions in major law firms, and then I have to get a position, an offer from a major law firm. Think of alternate routes and think of what would really make you happy and what you'd really like to do.
Sandra, I have a follow-on question, which is that you were sort of hinting at it, which is how it's different being in a company versus at a law firm. I'll give you an example from my perspective. So, I run an investment bank, so we're an outside investment bank, right? Mm-hmm. And when we do M&A projects, and the way we spend our day is a certain way, and we have to get clients and so forth. If you look at someone doing M&A in the M&A department of a major company, or like Bristol Myers Squibb, it can be very, very different in terms of what you do, what the priorities are, and the skills. How would you contrast what it's like in terms of being a lawyer inside a company versus at a law firm?
Well, the chief difference, I think, in working in a law firm versus being an in-house lawyer is that, first of all, we don't have billable hours. We're not worried about that. But we're there at the beginning of an issue. If the company wants to make an acquisition, a good lawyer, and I'm in the session with the CEO and others who are talking about strategy. What do we need to do and how do we get there? So even before we decide to pursue an acquisition or pursue a divestiture, the lawyer provides input on what, and it's not just legal input on HSR, Hart-Scott-Rodino issues, competition issues, but it's really what makes good business sense given the strategy of our company, given what we have in our research pipeline, what makes sense. And so I think that's the chief difference, that you are in on something from the very beginning, whereas law firms are often involved after a decision is made to pursue something. You retain the law firm, and the law firm would help get it done. And so that's the chief difference in the M&A context. But it's true in other contexts too. Before, our marketing team wants to do something, they would get the lawyers involved in a project and sort of get our ideas on what makes sense, what makes not just, again, legal sense, but what makes good business sense for us to pursue, and you stick with that. And in the in-house lawyer, you get a reputation very quickly as someone who just says no, or someone who really understands the business and can facilitate that business. And we get outside counsel involved where we don't have the expertise inside, because oftentimes an issue comes up where that doesn't come up often enough that you need to have an in-house lawyer with that skill set. But the good in-house lawyer also knows when to get outside counsel involved, and carefully works with outside counsel to achieve the result that everyone envisions at the beginning of the engagement.
Well, I'm sure, Sandra, that you would just really miss the fact that you don't have to go out and solicit clients, right?
They just yes. I have to say it's really great working in-house when people sort of just stop by your office and want to talk to you and get you involved, and so there's never a shortage of clients.
Yeah, that's right. Well, of course, for these two gentlemen, they don't have to. They just come to them. But
It's
for
a
the
sales-
rest of the world, it's different.
partially a sales job.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
that?
No, I was going to
mean,
ask you as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is what Sandra had said earlier, that she didn't want to join a law firm because she didn't want to be stuck doing research, right? But the truth is that the expectations placed on you change throughout your career. So as a beginning associate, yes, you're going to do a lot of research, and if you're a good student, you're probably going to be a good associate. But the funny thing is, the longer you stay at the law firm, and then when you progress from an associate to a partner, all of that, the game changes, right? So then what's valued as a partner is getting business, is managing the cases. Nobody wants a partner sitting in a library doing research. And so, I know a
And
lot
clients don't want to pay for that.
Exactly. And so the thing you're doing that you're good at, that you were hired for, that you were rewarded for, all those skills become irrelevant, even though you're in that same job. And as you progress, you've got to be able to adapt, and if you like doing the research and you hate getting business, then maybe you shouldn't be a partner in a law firm, because a big part of what you're doing is getting business, and so, or you won't be successful at that. So that's the funny thing, is that even though you're in the job sort of changes around you. And so if that's not going to work, then you need to start thinking about a different direction.
Can I ask you the same question I asked Sandra, but from being in the court system? How does it feel different? I mean, I'm sure it's even different between being in the court system and in a corporation, right? But can you point to the couple of things that you think are different, noticeably different about being, working for the courts versus working for a company or for a law firm?
Well, I've only been with a judge for a month, so I can't speak to that well. I'm still trying to figure out how that feels. I'm getting used to the power and the responsibility. It's like, can I do that?
You can do a lot.
But right, it's like, can I just should I just make a decision on that? And so I don't think I can speak well to that point yet, Peter. Maybe in a year or two. But I can say that I've worked in the government primarily. I've worked a little bit in private practice, but I think working in the government is a different animal too. It's a salaried position. You don't have to go out and get business. The values are different. It's not about making money, and your client is usually that governmental entity, the agency or the organization you're working for, but more broadly the common good. And so I feel like the trade-off for me was getting paid less money for the luxury of being able to do more of what I thought was the right thing, and to me that seemed like a pretty good trade-off. And it was a privilege, to be able to stand up in court and say, Sandra was in the same position as a DA, stand up in court and say, I represent the people, I represent the government, I represent the United States, and to be able to make the arguments and to do what you thought was right, to, dismiss a case if you thought the government didn't have enough evidence to convict someone, or to go forward zealously against a really bad guy. So I think, those are the kinds of choices that you're going to have to make in the course of your career. And again, I keep saying this, you're going to have a long career, so at different points in your life, different things will be important. It may be that you start out early on and you say, I don't need the money, I'm young, I don't have expenses, and so I'll take a lower paying job, and later when I have a family and I need to put kids through college, I need more money. Or the reverse, I'm coming out now, I need to pay off my loans. When I've paid off my loans, then I'll be better, I'll be in a better position. But I think people don't like to talk about the money, but I think the money is an important part of it, and you have to understand how you feel about your relationship to money, and what it reflects on you, and the way it allows you to live the life, both on a material level and a values-based level that you want.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting from my personal perspective, since my wife has both been a lawyer at Skadden Arps, a law school professor at Columbia, and a judge, so indirectly I've experienced all of these, and believe me, they're all very, very different in terms of what she has to do every day and what the priorities are and what was exciting and frustrating about each. The next one I'd like to direct to the two gentlemen over here, which is, I think if you look at TV shows, the law profession has more TV shows than any profession. I mean, I could be here for half an hour.
Every one of us are that good looking.
Yeah, that's right. And you have that, I understand you all have that fluorescent lighting,
That's right.
and fast cars and
Clothes.
Ferraris and so forth.
I
So
drive a
Great
minivan.
wardrobe.
Anyway, right.
Yes.
But it is true, though, that I think the legal profession probably, going back decades, right, from Perry Mason and so forth, but, Law and Order and all these shows, and, and I think right behind it now is forensic science, so now there are like 5 shows on how sexy it is to be NCIS and Bones and so forth, right? Looking at those, and also the general, population kind of view of the legal profession, what would you point out as, what some of the myths are, good and bad, right? Versus realities from your point of view as lawyers? Because I assume you occasionally watch these shows, right? But you are in the profession and you talk to people who have impressions. Any comments on sort of myths versus realities? But I understand you solve a case every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? That is clear, right? That's not
Yeah,
a
it's
myth.
funny, yeah, we have the every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes.
My secretary comes into my office and goes, boom, boom, and then we move the case along. There are times when, I'm a litigator, as is Les, and so there are times we go to court, and that aspect of the job I find personally exhilarating. If you don't like standing up in front of people and having a high pressure moment in public, that might not be the career choice for you, but if you like it, it's really exciting, and there's nothing quite so rewarding in my mind of being able to say to a client, we've got a great result for you. You're not going to jail. You've been exonerated of the fraud charge, or we've been able to go ahead and you can go ahead with your business combination or whatever it is. That's really very rewarding. The amount of work that goes into those moments, the Perry Mason moment where you're cross-examining a witness, there are many, many hours, that go of not particularly glamorous work, sitting in an office, going through documents, going through cases, coming up with the arguments. It's a labor-intensive job, and I personally enjoy it, and I like doing the research. I like going out and figuring out the statutory construction to make the argument, that sort of thing. But it's not for everyone. So I would say that's one myth, is that it's all about the exciting stuff and there's not a lot of drudgery. There's a fair amount of drudgery. If you like that kind of work, you should know that. And if you don't like going and sifting through things and meticulously putting together your cases or dealing with your transaction issues, you should know that too. Because there are parts of the law that aren't quite like that. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say, we've already talked about it a bit, but the clear paths, sometimes people think, there's one path here and I'm going to take path A and then I'll go to path B. I think things are much more flexible than that.
Les?
When I decided to go into law, I had visions of all the movies that you've described, and I thought that's what would happen to me. But things have changed radically When I was thinking about the law, there was precious little information out there about what the practice of law was like. You had the movies, you had TV. Today, there is enormous information out there about practicing law. All you have to do is turn on your computer. And my experience is that college students and law students who are pursuing a legal career are miles more sophisticated than I was when I jumped into it. And so for me, and talking to the audience we have here today, the mythology question should really be addressed to a much more narrow, and I would argue much more sophisticated, knowledgeable group of people who are now considering law. And so the mythology is much more subtle and perhaps more difficult to rebut. I mean, let's talk about the private bar again, because that's where I work and where I have the most experience. I think there are many, many different kinds of law firms in many different parts of the country. There are extraordinary differences that you have to pick up on before you make a choice in the private sector. But it is a myth that people who go to big law firms are in the library. That's not true. People who go to most large law firms today, if they're transactional lawyers, they're involved in transactions, and they're being trained how to craft and how to negotiate a transaction which is in the interests of their clients. Young lawyers who go to large law firms today, who are in the litigation world, are engaged in developing factual records, in preparing for appearances in court, including writing briefs, arguing appeals. Now, are they the lead trial lawyer a week out of law school? No. And that brings me to the other question. You need to get trained when you get out of law school. You have to go through law school, that's training, sure. But when you get out of law school, you need a period of training. This is a very complicated profession, and there are sub-professions all over the place. And it's on-the-job training that I believe is critical for somebody getting into this profession, no matter where they want to go, whether they want to go into government or some public service-oriented career or anywhere around the globe. You need training, and indeed, for decades, the law profession, you could get into the law profession by clerking on the job. They've abolished that, but it recognized that an extremely important way of becoming a good lawyer is to get training. And I think you have to decide when you're getting out of law school where the best training opportunity is. Who's going to mentor you? Who's going to correct your papers? Who's going to say, you know, that was a mistake? Who's going to give you feedback? There are many, many places, both in the public sector and the private sector, where you can get that training. And there are many places where you will not. And so I think one of the critical things to think about for even a sophisticated audience is where's a good place to start? And, you know, given whatever goals you may formulate at the outset, where am I going to get the training to meet those goals? And I think, from my own experience, I think if you get to the right private law firm with the right culture and the right values, I think that would be a pretty good place, not the only place, but a pretty good place to get training in the real world of what it is to be a lawyer.
Now I'm going to ask a question that's not on the list here, but can only be asked of the two people to my left, and that is, are there any comments that you'd like to make about what it's like to be a woman in the legal profession? Right? We had a panel on the medical profession, and we had a fifth-year female doctor, and she said, I love what I do, but then she literally said, okay, here are the things you just have to deal with, because if you're female, there's some things you got to deal with that just you don't have to deal with if you're male. Are there any of those things, or have they sort of gone by the wayside? Is it
No.
sort of become gender neutral?
Yeah.
You know, any comments? Either one of you.
I could start. Well, it's definitely not gender neutral. You know, that's for those who say that it is. You know, you could have flex time, as we talked about, because I think women are disproportionately impacted by childcare responsibilities, the decision to bear children and then to raise children. And it's nowadays it is true that more fathers take responsibility in that too, so it's easier in that regard. But it's still, you know, women still worry about if I take flex time, am I going to be considered as seriously as what I will be considered a serious lawyer? And I think that there are a lot more pressures on women to raise children and to have a great career, and women oftentimes have to make more choices as to what they want to do and feel more conflicted. And women, I think, just naturally, and this may be stereotyping, but we're just harder on ourselves too. We want to be great wives, we want to be great mothers, we want to be great children to our parents, and there's just a lot that we put on ourselves. So I think I have 2 adult sons, and I work throughout my career. And what the real game changer for me, what was really critical, was to have a partner who was, my husband's extraordinarily supportive. And I also realized that nothing's going to be perfect. I'm not perfect, you know, and far from perfect. And you're going to have to make choices as to, and your choices may be rooted in what needs to be done that day. And you have to live with those choices and not worry too much about it. Just stop thinking so much about it and just do it. And I think in the legal profession, as there is in almost every profession, people look at women a little harder and they question your commitment once after you have children. Whether it's warranted or not, there's always a question about your commitment to the job. I don't know, Peggy, you can.
Yeah, I mean, so the world, let's say 50 years ago, was overwhelmingly male, the legal profession. And so the structure was set up for that. You know, a man working full-time with a wife at home and the kids, et cetera, and not too many women there. And the discussions at conference tables during downtimes was about sports, let's say. You know, and when I was in law school, it still felt that way. Lunchtime discussions were always about sports. And so, you know, now there are more women in the profession, and so there are gains, but we're really tinkering with the system that was set up by and for men, right? And so the basic structure has not changed. There have been some changes to it. There have been some improvements, obviously. You know, Sandra and I are in the profession and have been fairly successful, so there is room, but the basic structure is still there. And so I think, you know, the fact that, sorry, Peter, you mentioned, you know, pointing out to the women, and that one of the main things is about childcare, to my mind, that means that the system is still pretty rigged. So if this were not a discussion, then I would say we're there. But so there's still a long way to go. I didn't get married till I was 46, and I don't have children. And a large part of it is because of the career path that I chose, which is that I was very focused on my career. I chose to go overseas and work for the UN. And it's, you know, it's hard to have a partner who's willing to go overseas and do these things with you. The men, my male colleagues in The Hague, brought wives and girlfriends with them and children. None of the women lawyers did. Okay, so that's a pretty stark fact. The women were divorced or single or widowed. Not a single one of my colleagues back then, it may have changed a little bit, not a single one of my female colleagues was able to bring a male partner with them. And that may reflect on the culture, and it may reflect on, you know, men's resilience and willingness to go along with a wife. You know, I think Sandra's partner is a rare case, but so I think it is hard, and but I think it's getting better, and I think that it will only change when there's a kind of a tipping point. So in the Eastern District of New York, there is more than 50% female judges now, and it really makes a difference. You know, it does. We feel, just as an example, we have lunches with the judges. We never talk about sports. You know, it's not like we're talking about cooking, but it's not a predominantly male kind of atmosphere. It's about, we're talking about culture, we're talking about our lives, we're talking about other things. And so, you know, I think those are very subtle cultural cues that make people feel included or excluded. And I think, like I said, I'm very optimistic, but I think that these things won't change without effort.
By the way, the reason why I asked the question is because I know about the difference, because
Yeah.
I have two sisters, both of whom became partners of law firms, and I have a wife who was a judge in Geneva, and so, you know, so I dealt with a lot of the same
Yes,
issues
yeah.
about what do you do with your kid, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so forth, so.
I wasn't trying to say,
No, no, no,
you
no,
did anything
no,
wrong, but I
asked the
mean
question because
that,
I know
yeah.
in part what the,
Yeah.
what the answer is.
May I just interject?
Yes.
You know, on this topic, I think that we should talk about, I mean, I think that gender diversity is important. I think that overall diversity is important, and they're both a problem in the profession.
Yeah.
So if you look at the bench is more diverse on the whole than any other part of the profession. I would put parts of government, not all parts of government, but parts of government and in-house is sort of second, and law firms are trailing behind.
Yeah.
Some law firms are trailing way behind. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and at the current pace of change, there will be equity, 50-50 in equity partnerships of major US law firms shortly after she retires. So that's the pace of change right now if you look statistically. There are some firms who I think are getting it more right than others. And I think that there have been changes. Part of it's driven by male partners who have working partners. I think that helps. There are a lot of things that are helping. So what I would say to you, if you are worrying about diversity in your choices, whoever you are, is to look not just at the programs that are on the websites, because Les is absolutely right, there are lots of information out there, but look at the indicia of, and this is in any organization, of soft markers of inclusion for you, whatever those are. So when I was in your shoes, I was looking, I have children, and my family's important to me. So I was looking around. Some of the law firms, I would see pictures of children, you know, on the desks. Some I did not. You know, I would sometimes ask, when's the last time you saw your child? You know, sort of a cheeky question, but I usually ask that after I got the offer. But seriously, look at objective markers for people's lives. How many partners are getting made up? How many of those people are people who would add to the diversity of the culture? Where do people who are of color, where do women go after they enter a particular organization? And what are the affiliations of any organization? I think about it in law firm terms, long term with their people. You know, we have alumni events, I know Paul Weiss does as well, and a number of firms do. They have these close relationships. So you can see people had a positive experience there even if they didn't stay to become a partner. Those are the kinds of things I look for, because I think Les is absolutely right. The training and mentorship is critical. And you don't need to get it necessarily from someone who looks exactly like you, but the people you're working with have to be open to people who look like you, or you're not going to be happy there.
You know, there's a great conversation, and I want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. I will say, of the remaining questions that I have on here, I think we've already talked about them, because the remaining ones are what kinds of people do well or don't do well, happy or not, and I think people have touched on it. So I feel very comfortable now really trying to open it up to questions, because I want to make sure the audience has a chance to ask. So Elaine, we're going to just arbitrarily, we're going to open it up first to a question from a Yale student up at Yale.
Anybody have any questions?
Hello, hi. This question is for Sam. And you mentioned earlier that one of your primary motivations for attending law school in the first place was to help, you know, the members of the immigrant community from which you came. So I was wondering, because I find that goal extremely relatable, and I wanted to ask you to what extent, if you could reflect on the extent to which you think your career has so far satisfied that initial goal.
Could people here that understand that question?
Yes, I think the question, there was a question about whether or not the goal of serving the your immigrant community
Sure.
was.
Oh, that was for me then.
founded.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it was
I'm
for
just
you.
looking.
As I
maybe
understood.
it was
Not for you
less.
guys.
It was
Okay,
not
go
me.
ahead.
Yeah, I think it really has.
That's what it was.
I practice corporate law, but I still get many questions from from my family and family members about issues. I make a ton of referrals, and just having someone in the family who, and I was the first person in my family to go on to graduate school. It made, and among my siblings, I'm one of 10 children, and we were the first set of kids to go to college. All my siblings went to college too, but I was the first one to go to graduate school. That made a huge difference in our immediate community. People were very, happy to know, and they talked to my mom or my dad all the time if they needed help somewhere. And I know like all sorts of legal referrals to make for all obscure types of things because I like to network too, and I like working with people. I'm a very people-oriented person, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to make a lot of referrals to talk to people, whether it's about wills, whether it's a criminal matter, whether it's an immigration issue, whether it's a trust and estates issue. There is such a need in immigrant communities for good legal work that companies, large corporations wouldn't necessarily, or law firms would be involved in. So there's a real need for people for children who come from immigrant communities to go into law so they could be a conduit and be a source for their communities. So it's been very
Great.
gratifying.
And let me just add also, also as a child of immigrants and an immigrant myself, a lot of these opportunities come outside your primary job. So both Sandra and I are both involved in the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. So we work with a lot of Asian American lawyers on issues that are important to us, both on the policy level and in individual cases. And so that's an amazing opportunity
Yeah.
to really connect with people and to give back to that community.
Now, those of you who are watching by streaming video, I don't see any questions. If you have any questions, please send them to yalecareerpanels@gmail.com. So I'll wait for your questions. In the meantime, any questions from anyone here in New York? Yes, go ahead. And speak loudly so the audience call can hear.
Touch on the topic of the cost of legal education, and I know we talked about the increased variety of opportunities, although limited as far as how many are really out there. To what extent do you think the cost of legal education does and should impact the decisions that people make? I know you talked about just general choices, kind of follow your dream. My first year of law school tuition was $32,000. At my reunion this year, I found out it was $54,000. Wow. Right, so it has increased astronomically, and not at every school. But to what extent do you think that people should consider the cost of legal education, what that looks like at the end, and what repayment programs look like at certain schools when they're making decisions to go into law school?
Of course you have to look at it. I mean it's impractical to say just do it and rack up all the debt, and because there's no guarantees, we said, that you'll get a job afterward. And so I think you have to take the cost of law school into consideration and think about whether or not that's something that you're willing to live with debt, and what are your chances of getting a job afterward. And you have to think about the law school you go to, what's the general rate they have, and graduates getting jobs after they go. So I think you have to, I don't know if anyone on the panel thinks differently, but how do you not look at costs?
Just sign on the dotted line.
Unless you're really wealthy, I mean, and that, I'm sure there's.
Well, and then you should also look at schools that have loan forgiveness programs, and schools that have scholarships, and schools that, have different programs to help ameliorate that debt. I mean, it is pretty crazy, compared to what it was like when I was in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly makes it difficult depending upon what kind of law you want to do, right? I mean, that's an obvious thing.
Yeah, look, it's an obvious factor, but it goes back to what I think all of us have said in one way or another. This is a much tougher profession today than, say, 10 years ago, to get the kind of job you want and to progress. So, to go into the law, you have to do well. And that's not distinctive to the law. There are a lot of professions of which we can say that today. The job market generally is tougher than it was 10 years ago. But you have to be good. You have to get into a law school that you want to get into, and You have to know what you want to do. And that era of I want to go to law school because I can't think of really what I want to do, or I want to keep my options open, I think it's too expensive an exercise to do that nowadays. So I think the best I can say is, yeah, that's a factor. But the overarching factor is, can I succeed and do what I want to do in this profession? It's tougher. But I think in many respects, it's better. I think, you know, in an era when everybody was going to law school and the profession was packed with lawyers, that's not a good thing either, right? I mean, you want some kind of market force to govern how many people are going to be in a profession. I mean, what's the need? I mean, there are huge pro bono needs today. I'm involved with some pro bono organizations. They wish they had more help. They don't have money. It's really hard. So I think it's probably overall maybe a good thing that the profession has contracted a bit. I think a lot of professions, a lot of jobs have contracted a bit. I wanted to say one other thing. I've used the word profession. You know, people graduate from college and they get a job. And most jobs are about making money. A profession is different. A profession operates under a code of ethics. There are certain rules. It's not just about making money. It's not supposed to be just about making money. It's supposed to, you know, doing some good stuff, and not breaking the rules and not being a skunk. You can't say that about every job in America. I think at least as to what the requirements are and the rules are for being a lawyer, one can say that, you know, being a lawyer has greater responsibilities and obligations, and if you live up to them, a greater sense of reward and accomplishment. You know, it's great to make money, but it's probably greater to do some good along the way, and you can do that as a lawyer.
Elaine, any questions, additional questions from Yale?
Any further questions, anyone? One more question, Peter.
Okay. And we'll end. We'll have the Yale students have the last word.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a follow-up from what you just said, Mr. Fagan. On the issue of reward, what for each of you in your jobs has been the most rewarding?
Did you hear that? What has been the most rewarding part of your job?
Well, what I like about practicing law is I love to try cases, and I love to win. But the thing that's been the most consistently rewarding experience is just counseling people on how to get out of a jam, how to deal with really difficult problems. Sometimes they're business problems, sometimes they're personal problems. I mean, you know, if you practice in the private sector of the bar, there's, no matter what the case is about, it could be a patent case, it could be a securities case, it could be a matrimonial case, somebody's life, somebody's reputation, somebody's career, maybe somebody's liberty is going to be at stake. They don't come to a lawyer unless there's something really, really at stake. And if you can help that person through good advice and good judgment, that is a huge, huge sense of accomplishment and reward. And so for me personally, that's what I come to work for every day, to see if I can help some people out of really difficult situations. And if you succeed, you know, you have that's not only that sense of accomplishment, but you also have a relationship, which is just more than, you know, paying a bill, but you have a client and probably a friend who you'll have for the rest of your career.
So with that, are there any other? First of all, I want to thank our 4 panelists. I think you'll all agree they did an excellent job, and I hope that all of you feel that as a result of this hour that you're better equipped to make your personal decisions whether you're a student, undergraduate student, or you're a young alumnus, to make a decision about whether the law and what type of law is the right one for you. So please all join me in thanking our panelists.